Karina, for this 5th, we have flying July 5th. Let's take a look. I went in an airplane. I was excited as can be. We flew to the country far away to a hotel by the sea. We checked in at the airport and then we had to wait a long time to board the plane through the departure gate. The aircraft was on the tarmac, an enormous silver bird. The engine was screaming so loudly I couldn't hear a word. The attendant was on board to greet us. She showed us to our seats. I sat by the window with Teddy and ate some chewy sweets. Then we taxied down the runway. I hugged Teddy tight. The engine roared. The aircraft soared. We took off on my very first flight. We flew over the foottops, above the hills and trees, way up high in a clear blue sky across the salty seas. Sounds like they had a great first flight. You could always bring earplugs with you no matter where you go. Always bring earplugs because sometimes the noise around you is just too much. And it's good to have your own self-soothing of earplugs. You want to be able to have good hearing as you get older. So listening to loud noises now isn't always a good thing. This is Paul Revere's ride. Everybody knows the story about Paul Revere and how, during the American Revolution, he rode his horse to warn the monument of the British soldiers were coming. This famous poem by Henry Wardwell Longfellow has been the favorite of readers young and old for more than 100 years. Paul Revere's Ride, Henry Woodworth Longfellow. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April in 75. Hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or by sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfire arch on the north church tower as a signal light. One if by land, or two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for the country folk to be up and to arm. Then he said good night, and with muffled oar slightly rowed the Charlestown shore. Just as the moon rose and over the bay were singing wide at his morning's lay, the sunset British man of war, the phantom ship with each mast and spore, across the moonlight a prison bar, and the huge black hulk that was manifest by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile his friend, through alley and street, wanders and watches with eager ears, till in silence around him he hears the muster of men and the barrack door, and the second of arms, and the tramp of feet, and the measured tread of the Gillards, marching down to the boats on the shore. Then he climbed the tower of the old North Church, up the wood stairs, with slightly tarred, and the belfire chamber overhead, and startled the pigeons from their perch, and the somber rafts that rode him made masses and moving shapes of shade. Up the tumbler ladder, steep and tall, to the highest window in the wall, where he paused to listen and look down a moment on the roof of the town, and the moonlight flower over all. Ben earth in the churchyard lay the dead in their night in chamber on the hill, wrapped in the silence deep and still. There he could hear, like a slender thread, the watchful night wind as it went, creeping along from tent to tent, and seeming to whisper, "All is well." A moment only he feels the spell. Once the place and the hour and the secret dread of the lovely Bellfire and the dead. For suddenly all his thoughts are bent on a shadowy something far away, where the river winds to meet the bay, and a line of black and bends and floats on the riding tide like a bridge of boats. Meanwhile, important in mount and ride, booted and stirred and heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. He now pedaled his horse side, now gazed at the landscape far and near. Then impetuous steps the earth, and turned and tightened his saddle girth, but mostly watched with eager stride the Bellfire Tower on the old north side, at the rows above of the graves on the hill, lovely in splendor and somber and still. And lo, as they looks at the Bellfire height, a glimmering and then a beam of light, he sprang to the saddle and bridle he turns. He lingers and gazes till full on his sight, and second lamp at the Bellfire burns. A hurry of hooves in the villager streets, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles, in passing, a spark. Strides out of the steed flying fearless and fleet. That was all, and yet through the gloom and the light, the fate of the nation was riding that night, and the spark struck out by that steed in his flight, kindled the land into flame with its heat. He has left the village and mounted the steep, and beneath him twinkle and brood and deep in the mystic meaning of the ocean tides, and under the alders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge, is heard a thump in his streets as he rides. It was 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge into Medford town, and heard the crawling of the cock, and the barking of the farmer's dog, and the flap of damp of the river fog, and rising after the sun goes down. It was 1 by the village clock when the gallop into Lexington. He saw the glided weather clock swim in the moonlight as he passed, and the meeting house windows, black and bare, gazed at him with a splendor glare, and if they already stood aghast at the bloody work they would look upon. It was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town. He heard the bleating of the flock and the twitter of the birds amongst the trees, and felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadows brown, and on was safe and asleep in his bed, with who at the bridge would be first to fall, and who that day would be lying dead, pierced by the British muskball. You know the rest in the books you've read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then chasing the flocks to emerge again under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire a load. So though the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to the Middlesex village and farm, the cry to defense and not of fear, a voice of the darkness, of knock at the door, and the word that shall echo forevermore, far born in the night wind of the past, through all of history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, The people will weaken and listen to hear the humbling hoofbeats of the steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. Let's do, and here is the church and the tower. Let's do, oh, say, oh, playmate, come out and play with me, and bring your dollies 3, climb up my apple tree, shout down my rain barrel, slide down my cellar door, and we'll be jolly friends forevermore, more. It was a sunny day, she could not go out to play. She said with tearful eyes, my dolly's got the flu. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. I ain't got no rain barrel, I ain't got no cellar door, but we'll be jolly friends forevermore, more. Karina, baby, I love you and I miss you, and I hope you're having a great day today. I love you, baby.